everyone, and welcome to the Lord Gord Podcast. This is your host, Lord Gord. I'm giving you information that's factually correct and politically incorrect. And contrary to rumor, gigolos get lonely too. So this week, I'm going to talk about a topic that infuriates me every time I drive around my city. It's a topic that has made my city look like a third world hellhole. It's increased the cost of doing business in my city, and it makes my city look like it's a place of immorality, of decadent behavior, so on and so forth. And my topic this week is graffiti, or as it is sometimes sanitized as street art. I'm going to talk about why I chose to do my podcast this week on graffiti a little bit later, but I'm just going to jump into the gist of my podcast. Is vandalism and is a violation of private property rights. Its presence in neighborhoods and communities is a marker of chaos, disorder, and dysfunction. Its consequences are not only economic, but cultural, as people acclimate themselves to illegality and immorality. While leftist politicians decriminalize vandalism in order to keep blacks and Hispanics out of prison, because let's face it, it's not the Chinese doing all the tagging in LA, for example. White liberals celebrate and encourage these counterproductive behaviors from a distance. Therefore, the destruction of morality and the economic viability of inner city neighborhoods is cheered on, giving vandals more incentive to continue their illegal acts as they get rewarded for it culturally, not only by their little loser criminal friends, but also through some of these white liberals that celebrate their counterproductive behavior from a distance. So let's talk a little bit about the history of graffiti here. The modern American history of graffiti started in the 1960s in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. A man called Cornbread, and I don't think it takes too much brain power to hypothesize that he's one of the fellas. He was indeed one of the fellas. Cornbread started tagging Philadelphia walls in 1967 to get a girl's attention. So the man was breaking the law to get the attention of a woman. Way to signal to her that you will be a steady protector and provider for her by breaking the law in order to impress her. Great thinking there, bud. In the early 1970s, the graffiti ideology moved to New York City, and the purpose of graffiti was to show how many places the vandals could vandalize with their signature. So they would have their little signature, I don't know, Bonky Head 22, or I don't know, I destroyed James Brown Records. I don't know, and they tag it to show, hey, I was here because I vandalized this property with my name. As the skullduggery became more complex, vandals had to develop escape techniques like tagging at night or early in the morning and impersonating public vehicle drivers after the crime was done in order to evade suspicion. The MTA started a campaign against graffiti in 1982, but was unsuccessful. By 1989, however, all graffiti was removed from trains in New York, but vandals set their sights on buildings and streets. Today, the vandalism has spread to many cities and countries, and this immorality is not only celebrated by the participants, but by their white liberal enablers. And in my first podcast I ever did about hip-hop being the worst musical idea ever, I talk about how graffiti is one of the core tenets of the hip-hop ideology, how a violation of private property rights is in the foundation of the ideology, not only by stealing other people's music and putting your words over it, and I can give countless examples, just listen to that podcast, but also vandalizing people's property without permission, drawing on their property, putting your markers on people's property. So When people try to tell you that that ideology has nothing to do with criminal conduct or criminal conduct and behavior is steeped in the ideology. It is the tenets of the ideology. And like I said before, does country music glamorize vandalism and graffiti? No. What about classical music? No. Or funk music? No. Or soul music? No. So it's important to understand where these ideas come from and how they are transmitted. I mean, I told you that if you listen to that podcast was founded by criminals, vagabonds, and people who have no professional level music skills, and they spread their bad ideas of stealing other people's music, not learning professional level music skills, and vandalizing property. So now you go to every major city across the country and you will see tons of graffiti, whether you're in Detroit or St. Louis or Chicago or New Orleans. And I live in South Central LA. I see it all the time. Matter of fact, I was with my family yesterday. And just driving through the city, I was just pointing out to them, look at that building that has all that graffiti painted over. Because you can tell when a building has been painted over because the paint that they use to paint over the graffiti never matches the color of the original paint. So you can always tell. And virtually almost every building in South Central LA has that many times over. It is disgusting. It's vile. And it is a marker of the immorality and the moral failure of a lot of the people that live there, because they tolerate that and they accept it, and our politicians don't want to crack down on it. All right, let's talk about how graffiti is celebrated by some of these white liberals. All right, so I'm going to read a little bit of quotes from Heather McDonald's article about MoCA. MoCA is the Museum of Contemporary Art here in downtown LA. I'm going to read some quotes from her op-ed criticizing MoCA for celebrating and glorifying aberrant behavior that they would never tolerate in their own neighborhood. All right, here's some quotes from this. The Museum of Contemporary Art in downtown Los Angeles is celebrating graffiti, but not on its own property. MoCA's Pyramid Top headquarters on Grand Avenue is conspicuously tag-free. I wonder why. It appears occasionally on the outside walls of the Geffen Contemporary, its satellite warehouse exhibition space. But if you're having an exhibit that's glorifying street art, which is just sanitizing vandalism, and graffiti, if you're glorifying a certain behavior, why don't you want it in your house? I mean, I tell these same kind of people, the Barack Obamas, the Hillary Clintons, all these people who say, we need to invest in our public schools. We need to support our public schools. Yet they would never in their right mind send their kids to their public schools. Did they send Chelsea Clinton or Sasha and Malia Obama to those schools in D.C.? What do they know that us common people don't know? I mean, I know that those schools are garbage, but they want to force our kids to go to these schools at a point of a gun. They want to restrict in the growth of independent schools, so our kids are forced into those schools, because I've talked about in a few other podcasts how the teachers union is one of the biggest donors to the Democrat Party, and they are hand in hand in keeping our children stupid and keeping them continue to make money off of them. All right, let's keep going. Another quote. The exhibition Art in the Streets honors such alleged high points in graffiti history as the first Cholo tag on the Arroyo Seco Parkway and the defacement of LA's freeway signs, without the slightest hint that graffiti is a crime, that it appropriates and damages property without permission, and that it destroys urban vitality. Of course, so while they glamorize the behavior, they don't talk about the adverse effects, that it costs more to do businesses in those neighborhoods because they have to constantly shell out money to paint over graffiti, or that their insurance costs go up because they have an increased amount of vandalism in the neighborhood, or the fact that people don't like going to places with a lot of graffiti and vandalism because they rightfully assume that there's a lot of crime and decadence going on in that area, and the rule of law has broken down because no one is cracking down on the criminal behavior. Another quote. Potential customers shun graffiti-ridden commercial strips if they can. So do most merchants, fearing shoplifting and robberies. Law-abiding families avoid graffiti-blighted public parks, driven away by the spirit-killing ugliness of graffiti as much as its criminality. So true. Because when I go to nice neighborhoods, Santa Monica, Beverly Hills, so on and so forth, I don't see any graffiti. But you know where people who glorify this kind of criminality and social deviance live? Santa Monica, Beverly Hills, Encino, so on and so forth. There's no graffiti. So I've often thought to myself, if they love graffiti so much, if graffiti is so great, if it livens up the community and represents free speech and sticking it to the man, why not send all those taggers to your neighborhood? I'd like my neighborhood free of the taggers because I'd love for my neighborhood to be clean and economically viable like your neighborhood. So let's send those vandals and let's have them culturally enrich your area and we'll see how much you like it. Other quote. Mocha's hypocrisy in glorifying a crime that it would never tolerate on its own property is easily matched by the two-faced behavior of graffiti vandals themselves. They often dress up their egotistical assault on other people's property with defiant rhetoric about fighting corporate power and capitalism. I can almost guarantee you that most taggers and vandals don't have fathers. I mean, I've talked about this before in the podcast. Most gang members, most teen dropouts, most kids who are failing in school, most kids in poverty, so on and so forth, come from fatherless homes, single mother homes. I wouldn't be surprised at all if most of these taggers are born out of wedlock. And the curator of art in the streets, his name is Roger Gassman, and he used to tag, and I looked up Roger Gassman, and guess what he is? He's not Chinese. He's not Japanese. He's not Indian. He is a white liberal. Like I said, if you read Thomas Sowell's Black Rednecks and White Liberals, it talks about how these people celebrate and encourage these self-destructive behaviors that keep these lagging groups like blacks and Hispanics in poverty. By celebrating their criminal conduct, you're only giving them more incentive to continue the criminal conduct. And the criminal conduct has effects on the community. It makes it harder to do business there. It makes it more expensive to do business there. You know? It's horrible. Another quote. Art in the streets gives no clue why Angelenos should care so much about graffiti eradication. Indeed, if graffiti is the boon that art in the streets suggests, why should taxpayers shell out $7 million a year to have it painted over? If, however, the public is right to demand its removal, why is Mocha promoting it? I asked Mocha director Jeffrey Deitch whether Los Angeles should suspend its graffiti removal efforts. I don't know, he responded. I guess I know he'd say no if they were tagging up his neighborhood wherever he lives, because I looked him up. I couldn't find his political affiliation, but just by the way his website looked and the way he presents himself, I can almost guarantee you another white liberal. You know, if it was his garage being vandalized, if it was his gates being vandalized, if there are businesses in his neighborhood being vandalized, I'm sure he'd have a stronger opinion about graffiti than he did at the time that this article was written. Last quote from this article. Mocha's administration shares a defining trait with the graffiti vandals who the museum is celebrating: self-indulgence. The graffiti criminal combines the moral instincts of a 2-year-old with the physical capacities of an adult. When he sees a spot that he wants to mark, he simply takes it. Deitch and his trustees can toy with graffiti's outlaw vibe, as co-creator Aaron Rose euphemistically puts it, knowing full well that their own carefully ordered lives would be untouched by graffiti's ill effects. Yes, so much. It's almost like the same white liberals, so on and so forth, that'll say, you know, fatherlessness isn't that big of a problem. Illegitimacy is not that big of a problem, even though they come from stable 2-parent homes, even though they got married before they had babies, even though they encourage education and self-restraint and respect in their homes. They say that's not why blacks and Hispanics are lagging behind. It's not the way they act. No, it's racism or some other crap that they blame that's not true. And it makes me sick because as long as people believe that, and a lot of people, especially black and Hispanics, they believe that all their problems are due to someone else, they will continue to fail. They will continue to lag behind. I was just looking at a chart showing 25 to 54-year-olds with college degrees, and Asians have the highest percentage of their group with college degrees. I think Hispanics are about second to last. Values, man. All right. Oh man. Oh man. Yes. Why I chose to do this podcast was that when going to work, I saw a billboard, an Adidas billboard. If you're viewing this on YouTube, I'll show a picture of it. The Adidas billboard said, "Beyond the Streets, Graffiti, Street Art, and Beyond. Tickets on sale now through July 6th." And it made me sick because they are glorifying aberrant behavior. They are celebrating the worst aspects of the culture. They're appealing to the lowest common denominator. And I guarantee you that the CEO of Adidas and the higher-ups in Adidas live nowhere near where graffiti is prevalent. They don't live in the ghettos of Milwaukee or Detroit or New York City or Baltimore or Atlanta or South Central LA or any of these hellholes where people's homes are constantly vandalized, their garages are vandalized, people's businesses are vandalized. They live nowhere near. So they can stand away safely at a distance, cheering on this counterproductive behavior, and they do so at no price. And like I said earlier, I'd love for all those vandals to go to their neighborhood and culturally enrich them, share their street art. I mean, obviously, since they're celebrating street art, they love it. So yes, vandals of South Central and Chicago and all other ghettos across the country, please go to the suburbs, share your art, and see and see how they like it. See if their opinion stays the same about graffiti and street art. And Adidas for the longest time has been cheering on the black redneck culture. You know, they've been signing these rappers like Run DMC since the 80s. You know, Run DMC would wear their shoes without shoelaces because that comes from prison. Prisoners couldn't wear shoes with shoelaces, so they're glamorizing prison culture on the outside. They were tagging things. You know, I recently saw an Adidas commercial. They have some of the little hamburgers and young murderers wearing their products. Obviously, Adidas is very comfortable with the black redneck culture. I mean, they pay people that perpetuate those ideas, that embody those ideas. So why don't we take the black redneck culture of criminality, violence, self-destruction, illegitimacy, why don't we move it to your neighborhood since you like it so much? Because people like myself and other law-abiding people in these ghettos across the country, we don't like it. We would love to live in a neighborhood like yours where we don't have to worry about being robbed or being shot or having our business being vandalized. Okay? We'd love to have a community that's economically viable. We'd love to have a community where most people come from stable, intact families, where we have school choice. Okay? So, you celebrate the little hamburgers and the young murderers. I mean, just have them go to your neighborhood. You can sponsor them too. You can give them your Adidas. You can give them little spray cans. You can give them You can give them the gold stuff in their mouth. You can give them their gold chains. You can give them studios to make their quote-unquote music. You love them so much, go ahead and do that. You see, because I'm intellectually consistent. I don't say that illegitimacy is okay, but then I never have babies out of wedlock. I've never said that illegitimacy was okay. You know, I criticize sagging pants and tattoos and other aspects of the underclass culture. Do you see me with tattoos or mouth jewelry, or do you see me using slang or using profanity? No. I say don't blame other people for your problems. Take responsibility for your own life. Study, work, save. Do I live a frivolous, indulgent lifestyle in which I blame other people for my problems while living off the government? No. You're telling us one thing that criminality is okay. Graffiti is okay. But you never allow it in your own neighborhood. And I'm sure you're probably some of the same people that say, oh yeah, this hip-hop stuff, it's great. You would throw a fit if your kid was doing that crap. If they were sagging their pants and disrespecting women, talking about selling drugs and killing people. You throw a fit because you're a hypocrite. You are part of the problem. Stop celebrating this aberrant behavior. What they don't need are sycophants and cheerleaders and press agents. What they need is a good butt whipping. What they need is discipline, honesty, rule of law. Fathers. Adidas. Goddamn criminals. So, Heather McDonald had wrote an opinion piece in the New York Times as well, saying that graffiti is always vandalism. It's illegal. It's ugly. It's immoral. So on and so forth. So I'm just going to read some quotes, a few quotes I picked out from some of the, I can almost guarantee you they're white liberals in the comment section. So here we go. Ride the Pendulum teacher in New York says, a big crackdown on graffiti is a sign that there isn't any real crime for the police to take care of. The truth is that it really isn't a big deal in the scheme of things. The only kind of graffiti that does present a serious legal concern is when gangs use it to mark drug dealing territory. But in that case, the problem is the gang wars and the drug dealing and not the actual graffiti. Translation, a violation of private property rights isn't a big deal. Police, why are you making a big deal out of vandals vandalizing other people's property, writing on their property? What's up with that? They're only showing their artistic expression. So let's send the graffiti artists and the street artists, let's send them to your house. Let's have them beautify your house. And let's see how you like it. Okay? Since you don't care about private property rights, let's break into your house and steal stuff. Hey. Be cracking down on graffiti because it's not that big of a deal. If private property rights aren't that big of a deal, we should be able to break into your house and take stuff. Because, hey, we need it more. Idiot. Next quote comes from E. Douglas in New York City. The two biggest art retrospectives to hit New York City in decades were by John Michael Basquiat and Keith Haring. Both started out as street artists. Sanitization for graffiti artists, vandals, criminals, kind of like undocumented workers, illegal invader. Okay, the left, they're great at verbal virtuosity, man. They'll make hell in a handbasket sound like a Baskin Robbins special, man. Planned Parenthood, where you kill babies. No one who plans to be a parent goes to Planned Parenthood, man. Let's continue with the quote. When you cut, if not eliminate, art education programs, when through shady dealings close off spaces such as 5 Points irrespective of its impact on the community and providing a haven for artists to develop their craft, when art stores such as Pearl Paint are forced to close because they're priced out of their space, when you discourage bully museums and galleries from showing street art, what do you expect will happen? Translation. People have an excuse to violate private property rights if they don't get what they want. If they aren't given things for free through government coercion, then they have property and take other people's property for their own. Didn't you know that? Let's continue. I would suggest taking a walk around the Lower East Side, Astoria, pockets of the Bronx. The artwork, all done with the blessings of the owners who figured out a long time ago that it's better to work with them than criminalize them, looks fantastic. It adds a dynamic, it adds character to a neighborhood. I know that's a dirty word in the city these days, but maybe that's the biggest concern, especially in a time where there's a tremendous effort to make the city look as bland as possible. Okay. Let's have them beautify your house. And then second, those people who own those buildings gave the vandals permission. There's a difference between having permission to paint that filth on your building versus someone doing it without permission. Dummy. So-called graffiti art, I call it aerosol art or street art, it's found in everything we buy today. Sneakers, clothes, bikes, you name it. Things that appeal to black rednecks. Their art, their passion is going to come out of them in one form or another. More to the point, why criminalize someone for being artistic? Create and restore platforms for the artists to work on their craft, and the platform would take care of themselves. Like Michelangelo and other great painters. If they weren't given a bunch of free stuff to paint, they would just vandalize other people's property. I wonder if other countries in the world, like Japan and China and Singapore and Hong Kong, if the government doesn't give artists things for free, do their citizens start vandalizing other people's property, violating private property rights? I don't think so. I think this is just an excuse to be immoral. And this E. Douglas, I'd love to send those vandals over to his neighborhood so they can give his neighborhood character. And we'll see if he chooses to criminalize these street artists or not. Their passion. Why criminalize someone for being artistic? We're not criminalizing you for being artistic. We're criminalizing you for violating private property rights. No one cares if you're artistic on your own car, or you're artistic in your own notebook, or on your own canvas. No one's criminalizing art, you fool. It wouldn't matter if you painted the Mona Lisa on the side of my house. If you did it without permission, it's against the law, and I want you in jail. This is from D.O. from the Chicago Burbs. Heather McDonald's opening question is coming amongst those who challenge the notion that graffiti is a form of art. If your home was tagged during the night without your consent, would you welcome the new addition to your decor? This is a trick question. No one would tag my home with graffiti. I wonder why, white liberal. Why? Because I live in a non-relevant neighborhood. Translation, you live in a neighborhood without blacks and Hispanics who are growing up without fathers. You live in a neighborhood in which most families are stable and they teach their kids values. They teach them discipline and responsibility. That's what it means to live in a non-relevant neighborhood. Let's continue. The same reason why Lamar and Viacom are not interested in putting a billboard in my front yard is the reason why my house will not be tagged. The tag will not be seen by the intended target audience, which are other criminals, most likely being other graffiti practitioners, so therefore would not happen. I agree 100% with McDonald that graffiti is always vandalism. That's why it exists. Graffiti gives a voice to those who challenge institutional norms, like private property rights. Therefore will always remain necessary. So, why aren't they tagging your house? You said because it's not relevant. But if they're challenging institutional norms, aren't the suburbs an institutional norm? Isn't that what the communists and the socialists hate? Don't they hate the suburbs? Because the suburbs have successful, intact families and are filled with people who work and want to keep what they earn? I don't know. But don't ever ask for consistency and logic when it comes to these people. As long as there are humans who feel disenfranchised by others, there will be graffiti. Really? Granted, the majority of graffiti is ego-driven, but from it, art can be born. Look at the example of John Michael Basquiat spray painting graffiti under the name Samo. Would New York have been better off if Basquiat did bridge the creative gap with graffiti? That sounds wrong. Would the world have been a better place without his post-graffiti art? Yes. The good news for those who share McDonald's views towards graffiti is that a world almost completely absent of the art form is possible. It's a sterile cultural void referred to as the suburbs, or civilized society that hasn't given in to criminals. Buddy. So, you're saying that a boring place is a place without graffiti. I mean, but with graffiti, you get the drive-by shootings, you get the robberies, you get the drugs, you get the horrible schools, you get the broken homes. Hey, don't you want that package? Don't you want to enrich your neighborhood? Don't you want a bit more cultural diversity in your neighborhood? You know what? I'm gonna read one more quote from these derelicts. This is from Lauren Homiak from Derby. It's art through vandalism. I'm not religious, but didn't God create a lovely world, his piece of art, and we went and polluted it and built houses, helped some animals become almost extinct, but yet he forgives us. Now, shouldn't you look at the horrible side? Be open-minded. Like tagging, there are some really good pieces out there that deserve to be seen. What the hell does that have to do with a violation of private property rights? If I remember correctly, God created the earth for his children. We did not create cities for vandals to violate private property rights, you fool. But that's the mind virus that's going around all throughout college campuses, through academia, Hollywood, so on and so forth. They celebrate and encourage this aberrant behavior, yet they never engage in it themselves. And if it happened to them, they would not like it one bit. They'd be the first person to call the police. They'd be the first person on their little neighborhood watch to say, "Hey, there's been an increase in graffiti. We need to crack down on it." But no, when it happens to those those black and Hispanics that can't think for themselves, oh, it's just cultural enrichment. Why are you making such a big fuss about it? They're just expressing their feelings. Hate it, man. I absolutely hate it. So, speaking about some remedies for graffiti, this has been my idea. What they do in Singapore is not only do they send you to jail for tagging for a few months, but they cane you. Oh man, if I got to run LA, if I caught you tagging, you would get a nice caning. All right? Because with harsh penalty, when the activity is more costly, you get less consumption. When the activity is more costly, you'll get less consumption. When an activity is less costly, you get more consumption. That's why with the law here, in which shoplifting under $950 is a misdemeanor, if you're even arrested at all, shoplifting has gone up. If you stop cracking down on graffiti and you stop enforcing the law, you're going to get more taggers, more vandals. But if those vandals knew, if you get caught, you're thrown in the slammer for a few months, and you get a cane upside your butt, I think they'd think twice about it. All right? And I don't care if they kept doing it afterwards. They'll pay the price for it. If you want to tag, if you want to violate private property, if you want to be a criminal, you pay the price. So they can talk about you're criminalizing them. No. They're criminalizing themselves by breaking the law. Let me give an example of what happened in Singapore. In 1993, 15-year-old American Michael K. and his friends went on a tagging spree in Singapore. They're tagging streets, cars, so on and so forth. He received 4 months in jail and 6 cane strikes. The sentence was reduced to 4 strikes because the American government got involved. And actually, some Americans agree with the punishment. I can almost guarantee you that they weren't people who work for Adidas or Mocha. So, in a nutshell here, graffiti is vandalism. It is a violation of private property rights. It helps destroy the moral fiber of a community, the economic viability of a community. It's ugly and it's hideous. And whenever you see a lot of it, that is an indicator that that neighborhood is out of control. The inmates are running the asylum. That is not a place that you want to do business. And that's what a lot of these inner city communities need. They need more investment. They need more jobs, less crime, more fathers in the home. And how are you going to get more business investments when your community isn't conducive to wealth creation, when you have vandals who make it more expensive because you have to pay higher insurance, when you have a lot of crime, which makes it more expensive because insurance, you have to sell goods for higher prices. You know, when people are going out of business in places like Baltimore because of vandalism and theft and robbery, so on and so forth, who would want to invest in your little hellhole community when there's not even a adherence to the basic rule of law? You know, in a lot of countries that are impoverished, one of the many reasons that they're impoverished is because their government's corrupt. They don't protect private property rights. And because they don't protect private property rights, most businesses never grow because they keep it in the family. It's a low trust society. And when I see graffiti, I'm thinking that's a low trust society because people aren't letting others know what's going on, and they're not protecting their neighbors from criminals and vandals. So, stop encouraging the graffiti. Stop celebrating these counterproductive cultures and start calling them out for the vandals, the criminals, and the dregs of society that they are. Because one of the only ways to turn around all these bad neighborhoods is to enforce the law and get the criminals out and make it conducive to wealth creation and investment. Because with more investment, there'll be more jobs. With more jobs, people will have more money. There'll be more goods and services in the neighborhood. that to me is desirable. That's the Lord Gord Podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe on iTunes. Subscribe on YouTube. Share it with a friend. Share it with the enemy. Share it with whoever you like. Get the Lord Gord album. This Isn't TV on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, Tidal, whatever. Look up the Lord Gord music video for Leave My Curl Alone on YouTube as well. Visit the website, postlife.com. Donate on Patreon. If you're in LA, come to the Blues Jam every Tuesday night at the p.m. to midnight for ages 21 and over. Free admission, $1 tacos. And if you can sing or play an instrument, you can come on up and play. Next week, I'm going to talk about something a little lighter in tone. I'm going to talk about Street Fighter. The recent game, Street Fighter 30th anniversary, came out. So I'm going to talk about my history with the Street Fighter franchise, my favorite Street Fighter game, and what I like about Street Fighter in general. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Lord Gord, and I'll talk to you next time.